Hello and welcome to the first of our four-part series on transforming education through a concept-based approach. My name is Rachel French and I'll be your host for this series. I'm a concept-based inquiry workshop leader, coach, and best-selling author, and the director of the Erickson and Lanning CBCI Trainer Certification Institute. And today we're discussing transforming beliefs. I'm joined by two very special educators, Sumit Mandwani, who is an economics teacher and professional development coordinator at Prometheus School in India. Sumit is also a certified Erickson and Lanning CBCI trainer. And Jessica Humblecroft, who's a full-time educational consultant specializing in concept-based inquiry. She's a certified Erickson and Lanning trainer and is now our science specialist for the Trainer Certification Institute. Jessica is originally from Australia, but she's also worked at schools in Dubai, Frankfurt, and Mumbai, and is now based in The Hague, the Netherlands. So welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me today.
So I want to invite each of you to start by just sharing a little bit about your own concept-based journey and how you were introduced to it, the professional learning that you've had along the way, and some of those aha moments. So maybe Smith, you can make a start and share your journey with us.
Sure. Thanks, Rachel, for having me here. So I was introduced to concept-based curriculum and instruction when I was looking for some professional development, and I was looking at the new IB guides that had come out for economics, because I am an economics teacher. And I was looking at materials that the IB had generated, and I wanted to have some insight into concepts that the IB was talking about. And I thought I would do injustice if I did not see the pedagogical model that the IB was proposing. And then ultimately I landed at Professional Learning International's website, and I realized that there was some really dense courses available. So then in 2020, I ended up doing the first course on concept-based curriculum and instruction for the thinking classroom. And then that was the course that was led by Dr. Erickson, Dr. Lanning, and Rachel. So that sort of gave me that instant aha, actually, because I realized that that was such a powerful pedagogical model to work with, because we were really inviting students to own what they were doing and own their thinking. And that sort of aligned with what I had always thought what education was about. And that led me to look at further professional development in that. And then I saw that there was an institute to become a trainer for this and also learn alongside. So not just train, but also learn in a year-long online model. And that's when I saw that there was instant sort of, there was that sort of instant aha again, and I wanted to sign up for it, which I did. And I'm glad I did, because I have seen that in my class now over about 2 years. I have had those moments where students have really done a lot more than what I had imagined earlier. So I would not have imagined them to take up so much of the ownership in the class that actually they did.
Fantastic. And I really appreciate your kind of commitment and your dedication to taking it to that next level, because I remember working through that first course with you and you said, okay, this is just the beginning. I need to continue on this journey. I'm really committed to understanding this. And I think over the last 2 years, we've met and done one-on-one coaching calls 3 or 4 times now. And so it's been amazing to watch your journey as you've progressed through developing units and then how you've translated that into classroom practice. So thanks for allowing me to join you in that journey. And Jessica, you actually were also in India for the last few years, and now you've moved to The Hague. So tell us about your journey as a concept-based educator.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, Rachel. My concept-based journey started a long, long time ago. So actually, Rachel and I used to work together at Frankfurt International School. We were very far apart though. Rachel was in the lower school and I was in the upper school, so we didn't see each other much, but I kind of knew she was doing this concept-based thing that I didn't know much about. And we had Lynn Erickson come out for a visit to the school, and I remember just sitting with my mouth like wide open for the whole weekend of the professional development, and just saying, thinking that this was everything that I'd always done in my classroom, everything I wanted to do in my classroom, but I wasn't sure how to package it up. And this was sort of like this neat package. and that, she'd done all this wonderful research and it made so much sense. So first aha moment. I then hastily read her book and as many books as I could get on about concept-based at that point. And then I kind of found myself alone, trying to go it alone in the classroom, in the upper school, and a few people sort of being a little bit interested in what I was doing, but nobody jumping on board, and it's pretty hard to go it alone. So I was doing my best plowing through. And then I moved to India and I was working in Mumbai at a school, and my school was very interested in concept-based, but wasn't really sure how to put it together. And we tried a few different models that didn't really work very well. And eventually I suggested to my principal at the time that we get Rachel to come in and do some professional development with the staff. And so Rachel came to Mumbai and worked with our middle school staff. And it was, I think, very revolutionary for many teachers at the time. But we were a school with a lot of freedom with how we put our program together. And so we basically dropped our old program and started from scratch with some new prototypes. And some were successful and some weren't so successful, but we were able to very much pick up as much concept-based as we could. And that was really exciting. I spent a lot of time talking about it to my colleagues. And then I asked my school to send me for the institute as well. And I ended up going to the second last in-person institute before the world fell apart. And I did the institute in person in the Netherlands, and then went back to school in Mumbai, and I trained all the teachers there in what I'd learnt. And again, I think it was that moment where people said, I've sort of been doing this in my classroom, but I wasn't really sure how to articulate what I was doing. And it provided that extra step of moving kids from, I'm doing a little bit of inductive teaching, I'm doing a little bit of showing examples, but I'm not really sure how to get them to that next level with that generalization. This provided that structure. And so I think for a lot of teachers, that was life-changing. Then I spent the better part of a year and a half teaching online, and concept-based teaching became a whole new thing online. And now I'm a full-time consultant. I'm living in the Netherlands again, so full circle in a way. And now I'm working, I'm a specialist for the Institute. And so I coach and model teach and work alongside all of the trainees. And I also work with schools helping develop their concept-based units, work with training their teachers, do model lessons, and I basically live and breathe concept-based now.
Yes, you do indeed. It's become a part of your every day, and you're also working on our maths project, so you get very involved as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, as Jessica, as you were saying, the fact that we're all doing something or the other which really wants to give students that agency. So it's not like, students don't have any agency in our classrooms, and I'm sure many of us allow for that. But I think what concept-based does, it just gives you that extra structured push towards organizing your learning and sort of creating that structure, which allows for greater student agency in our classes in terms of voices or choices, or both at the same time. So in other words, where we are working towards creating modules, creating structures which can allow for teachers to explore the power of effective learning and teaching further.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've also been very involved in presenting at conferences since you were trained. I think you told me the other day 5 international conferences that you've done in the last
6,
since
actually.
you started. 6 international conferences.
So I think this is something which needs to come out, that that research is what backs concept-based, and research is only going to take this further. So really, I'm a firm believer of evidence-based practice, and I think whatever we are doing is essentially evidence-based. So, and there is nothing, there's nothing more than good research and good evidence that can back good teaching. Because I was reading this book called Make It Stick, and the introduction has that last line, if I'm remembering it correctly, it may be a paraphrase, the fact that the most effective teaching practices cannot always be intuitive. So we can't be intuitive in what we're doing. We have to be intentional, and it can't be intuitive all the time. So that intention has to be planned, and that's what drew me to research. And I ended up since 2021 starting from the IB Virtual Asia Pacific. And I think to the recent IB Global, I mean, not just with IB, but I've also presented at other international conferences, such as the Asian Conference on Education, the International Conference on Education, the 28th Conference on Learning. I'm in fact presenting at the 29th Conference on Learning as well. That probably will happen in person in Spain. So I have really been at the research aspect of it. And I think it comes from the fascination that I have from the power of concepts and the fact that we're really drawing students to build those patterns, which is what the brain naturally seeks anyway. So I think that harnessing that power through research is what I want to do, really.
Yeah,
I was just going to say about the intentionality of teaching is something of the things that we do in the classroom has absolutely like revolutionized everything I do in the classroom. Yeah. And as I write more units and I write more lessons, and I especially focus in on the power of the questions that we ask, it is so important that we're intentional with those questions because they shape everything that those students are going to do, even though we want them to realize their understanding on their own. Those questions can make or break it. And even just a word that's wrong. And it's just amazing how, if you're so intentional with those questions, how amazing the learning is for the students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate what you were saying, Jessica, about the way that concept-based curriculum gives so much of what we were kind of dancing around before, a framework and that intentionality and that structure to hit the nail every time, rather than it working sometimes and other times going, I missed the mark, what went wrong?
Right, and your time is always so precious with your students. If you're being intentional about the questions you're asking and being intentional about the case studies that you're presenting and being intentional about how they're collecting the information and looking for patterns, then you're not going to have any of those, oh, I should have done that differently moments. Well, you'll have fewer of them anyway. Yeah. And you will have, your lessons will get more purposeful and every single one of them will mean something and will be helpful for the students constructing their understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I think to build that further, I think it's not just knowledge. I would also say skills need to be intentionally planned for, because one of the other things that, I mean, that's part of what I also recently presented at the IB Global Conference was to say that most of the research on skills actually says that teachers find it hard to assess those skills, or at least to know what to do with them. So the fact that, there's, in fact, again, I might just be paraphrasing, but there's a quote from Alice in Wonderland that, I had that plan. I knew exactly what that plan was looking like. It was very neat, but I didn't know what to do about it. So the fact that, sometimes what happens is that, we just assume skills are transferred. We assume knowledge is transferred. We assume a lot, and we assume learning is happening. But I think if we don't intentionally plan for it in terms of looking at the questions we are asking and the way we are presenting, and also kind of reflecting, if, for example, I remember in one of the coaching calls with Rachel, and we were talking about one of the case studies I had presented, and students were generalizing, and students didn't come really to that generalization that I wanted to. And I think Rachel's suggestion was that, why don't you go back and present another case study that can help you with that? So the fact that I am not letting that power of student agency go away, or that student ownership go away, I'm presenting more opportunities. And that intentionality of skill and knowledge planning is what the power of concept-based could be, where you are intentional about each act you do. There is, of course, intuition. You will, of course, have some degree of intuition, but primarily if you are planned for it, if you know what you're presenting and where the learning is going, you are not assuming learning is happening, you're assured learning is happening. Because sometimes clarity assumed is worse than clarity assured. So you want clarity assured, really.
I love what you're saying there about knowledge and skills, because I think that was a huge misconception for me kind of understanding concept-based and just sort of being introduced to concepts at a surface level. I was very much about, facts and skills aren't what's important in curriculum these days. It's all about concepts because concepts transfer. And, we know now, we understand now that really those facts and skills provide the foundation for conceptual understandings. And I think there are huge misconceptions out there about the role of knowledge and skills in a concept-based curriculum. But when
I think what Sumit was saying as well about not assuming that kids know how to do things, and that's why it's super important that as a school, as a division in a school, that you're mapping the skills that you require students to have in every subject area, as well as in approaches to learning, in everything that they do, and making sure we're being very intentional about giving students an opportunity to learn about them, to practice them, to generalize about them, all of those things, and making sure that we are covering them over and over again and every year, so that they're not just, oh, we just assume that the kids can do that.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So I want to invite each of you now to share a moment when your beliefs about what students are capable of and your beliefs about CBCI really changed. So if you kind of think back to maybe early days when you were starting to try this, maybe it was an incident in the classroom, maybe it was a conversation in the staff room, but can you remember that one time when you went, this is powerful?
I actually instantly know that one first incident that happened, and I was surprised. You know, there was that workshop I was doing with some pre-high school, pre-IBDP students. They were just entering the IBDP, and I was doing a workshop with them, with about 35 of them. And that workshop was on the credibility of sources, and that was basically on research skills, a part of research skills. So looking at credibility of sources, I could have easily gone on and told them about, there are all these tests available outside, there are these CRAP test and the SCRAP test, and, all these abbreviations are all out there, so you look at the credibility, the relevance, etc. So you see all of those, right? I could have easily gone on and said, you know what, the way to do it is you establish these as your criteria, and why don't you now just look at examples, essentially going deductive, where I'm telling them what the rule is, and then they just apply it in multiple instances, and they say, oh, we've learned this test today, that's how cool it is, right? But I inverted it, and I actually started presenting them case studies as to, okay, do you believe this news is credible? Okay, why? What makes you believe this news is not credible or credible? And presented multiple case studies, and then later on invited them to now make your own abbreviation in terms of what can be your own test for credibility. And they saw the pattern in the 5 to 6 instances that they saw. And, there was this one that stood out, and they made an abbreviation called TACOS. And they said, that's our test for credibility of sources. And TACOS stood for time and, author, etc., something on those lines. So in other words, I had these various other abbreviations that really expanded their learning. And, I get to know even today, by the way, that they still use those tests that they had constructed in a session of 2 hours, 2 years ago in 2020, 2021. And they're still using it in their extended essays, in their work today. And they go back and say, you know what, we had that session. Remember that test? We're going to use that in our group. So it's really how it has continued to be so powerful, because they had made it on their own. They did not have some other person's theory to be just used. They had you build their own understanding there, really. So I think that was that instant aha that I had, and I still get feedback on that. I think that was extremely powerful.
Yeah, fantastic. That was one of your very early experiments with flipping it and using an inductive approach. Yeah, amazing. They really stick with you. And Jessica, do you have a story that comes to mind when you think about what was it that shifted your beliefs?
I actually can't pinpoint a moment, but I mean the moment, and I'm not sure if this was the moment, but when I was in Frankfurt, I was teaching maths and science in the middle school, as well as science up into the DP. But I do remember this one instance where I'd had some students in year 6 for maths, and then had them for science the following year. So, the students rotate through different teachers, but I had a small group of kids that I'd had twice over. And I do remember this instance where they were like, oh, remember when last year we were doing something in maths? And I think that we can apply that learning here. And I was like, this is the moment. But I also think, so that was amazing. But I also think for me, it was a lot of, at the beginning, kind of digging down and having students going, oh, this is hard. Like, I don't want to do the thinking, I just want you to tell me how to do this. And I just want you to give me an algorithm. And I think for me, it was that shift of seeing students excited to dig into exploring new things and being okay with not getting it right the first time, but then looking for the patterns and thinking, oh, we own this learning. Like, I own what I just learned. I didn't get told it and, fed it to me on a spoon. and just go home and memorize it. But I actually did this hard work. And I think it was when I started seeing kids do that, that I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
In
and
fact,
I think, go ahead.
In fact, I had another this thing recently, because I recently became the professional development coordinator for my school, and I was doing a couple of model lessons with them. So I had made one lesson on supply and cost. I had made that for my AS level lesson for my Cambridge AS level class, and I used that with the teachers. And now I think it's constant ahas when I see cross comparison charts all around, and I see the create and combine happening all around. Because in fact, the first day that I had a 2-week structured PD program with teachers. The first day I used create and combine to define a few terms as a school, and it's surprising, or actually maybe not, that now I see create and combine all around my school, really. And I see these charts coming up, and I see cross comparison charts being, as a part of many, many unit plans. It's really fantastic how, I did not explain the theory behind it. I did not do anything else, but I just used them multiple times. And teachers have now actually started applying, they're using those understandings already from the PD program, and they're now using it in their classes. So it's as instinctive as that, because, you're really harnessing the basic fundamental power of the brain to seek patterns. And, that's what we're doing. So it's constant ahas now every day.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. I really love that. And that is one of the best ways of leading professional development for teachers, and whether that's workshops or whether that's just your staff meeting after school, to use those strategies. I love doing four-corner debates with teachers and silent discussions with teachers, because that's how they'll experience it as a learner. And when we can have that experience of the aha moment ourselves, you can't forget that. And so you can't help but want to replicate that feeling of aha, or that light bulb moment for your own students. So that's so exciting. Thank you for sharing that story, that you're seeing them. That's when you're making a difference, when you're starting to see generalizations on the walls around the school and cross comparison charts on the walls around the school.
Yeah.
I do some work at my local school here, and my husband is a teacher there. And I remember him coming home one day and saying, I know it's making a difference, because I was on wet lunchtime duty today, and I was walking through everyone else's classrooms, and everywhere I went, I would see cross comparison charts up on the walls. So you're starting to kind of have a trickle down effect through the school, which, that's really, really exciting to hear.
I was going to add as well that it's really nice when you see the aha moments with teachers as well, not just with the students, right? Like what you were saying, Sumit. I was recently coaching somebody who's been writing a unit plan, and she has really been struggling to, I guess, get her head around how to reword, how to, make sure that the questions are really well structured, make sure the generalizations are really nailed down. And I hadn't seen her for a couple of weeks, and she came back and she was literally bubbling with excitement. And she's like, I scrapped everything and I went right back to those concepts, and I've rewritten all the generalizations, and I'm so excited to share them with you. And it was that moment that you're like, oh, this is why we do this. This is what we want. We want teachers to be excited about what they're creating for their students as well, because otherwise we're not going to see that excitement in the classroom either, So that was super exciting. And her generalizations were really amazing. So she'd done some great thinking around what it was that she was supposed to be producing, and had really taken a lot of time and grappled with it, and, argued with herself in her head about it, and then produced something really amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I realized when concept-based was making a difference is when I was working as a curriculum coordinator, and the teachers suddenly appreciated planning. Whereas before, it had been like this, we've got to put it on the planner. Like, yes, they were planning, but having to actually write it down on the planner was just this kind of tension. And so that switched to, let's sit down and map this out and write our generalizations. When your teachers are excited about writing generalizations, that it's making a difference. All right. So my next question is, what role did the Erickson and Lanning CBCI Institute play in shifting your beliefs? And what was some of the aha moments for you, Jessica, that was a week, and for you, Sumit, that was a full year. So what were some of your aha moments in that process?
the CBCI Institute seemed like a natural progression for me because, I wanted to really learn more and practice and eventually get to training teachers in consulting schools. So it seemed like a natural progression for what I wanted to do. And I think the fact that it was a year-long institute really gave me that time to take practices back to the classroom and then bring them back to the institute. And I think the constant sort of check-in sessions and the Q&A sessions and the subject specialist sessions where Jessica did a fantastic model lesson, I still remember, and I still quote it all the time. That became really the moments of aha that were happening, because I could see the practice going to my class, seeing other specialists do it. I think it was like a wholesome sort of mix of things that we were getting really at the end of it. And I think earlier I did have apprehensions, to be honest, because I thought this is not face-to-face, this is online, how effective will it be? And, the natural sort of apprehension for anything being online, not being that, engaging. But I think the cohort that we had, and I think with all the specialists and with you, Rachel, with Dr. Erickson, Dr. Lanning, and Tiffany being around, I think it really, the engagement never really dipped, I say, at any point. And the constant sort of practice that we had really gave us the time to space out everything and to learn things, as we were going. So I think, and what I've essentially learned from the CBCI, I think, as what I'm doing now is where I'm learning how to use it in my class, how to do research on that, and also now as the PD coordinator to take it to my teachers. So it's really transformed the way I imagine my own career, to be honest, as a teaching professional or as an education professional, really.
Fantastic. And Jess, what about you?
Well, I had an obviously very different experience being in person and 8 days long, and it was very intense, but amazing learning, because, you just really got to immerse yourself completely in all things concept-based from 7:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. It was all encompassing. But I think the thing that I loved the most was jumping in and having to really stretch my brain to plan write generalizations in a subject area that was not my own, which is very often what you're going to have to do as a trainer, and really apply the learning that I just really deeply engaged with, basically taking apart what knowledge and how knowledge is constructed, how strategies and skills form the processes that we need to be teaching our students, and then trying to apply that into a situation. I remember actually really clearly, as a middle and high school teacher, I somehow ended up in a group with upper elementary students planning a literacy unit, which was about as far away from, at the time, my comfort zone allowed, being a science and maths teacher. And I remember working with this group of incredible educators, and we'd all just been through this training and us really plowing through this hard thinking work. And for me, the realization of how much work it was to plan and to think in this way, but how rewarding it was when you saw what came out the other end. And I thought, this is why I'm here, because I understand this, because I want to live this, because I want to deliver this in my classroom, and because I want to go back to my school and be able to share this excitement. So I plowed into that elementary literacy unit plan with gusto. And I think it was extremely rewarding. And also the other thing I was going to say is the big thing that I really took away from the Institute was I made a lot of really great friends and connections from the Institute. And to this day, I'm still in connection with many people who I was actually attended the Institute with. And then, of course, over the last few years, training a lot of people and being involved with the training side of the Institute, and meeting lots of wonderful people who I've kept in contact with and use as thought partners a lot. That's been really amazing, particularly once we've been online, because you don't have people to stand in a classroom or in a planning room with. And so often just calling up one of those people and saying, can you listen to me for 5 minutes about this idea, or I'm stuck here, can you help me out? So I think that was really, really great to be able to rely on those other people that you otherwise didn't have a network with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that thought partners.
In fact, I think that was really true for me as well. I think the areas of the subject areas that we were not really into, because I am more into the humanities, and I do economics and I do theory of knowledge, and I do global politics, but I don't, for example, engage in science at all. So for me to actually experience that lesson, and get those coins and to get those temperatures mapped, etc., I think it was like an experience after ages, probably after maybe middle school probably. But I think the fact that, one was getting into that, and I think that equipped me today to help teachers across different subject areas. So, when in school, I have this teacher, who's doing an English literacy unit in grade 6, and when she wants to talk about films and the perspective on films, I feel capable to sort of help her and talk through about a unit. I may not be an expert in that, but I know what generalizations are. I understand how they can be looked at in a classroom. What is the power of questioning? So, and I think if we have those fundamentals, I think really we can be expanding our professional expertise across more than our subject areas, really. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really intentional parts about the Institute is building people's confidence to not have the subject area knowledge, but to have the right questions, to empower teachers to own their own unit planners, but to be able to ask them questions that will unlock their thinking. In the same way that we want to do that in our classroom, our role as coaches and as facilitators is to really guide people with questions to be able to help them clearly articulate understandings. So I remember, I've said this probably a couple of times before, the very first workshop that I was leading was actually one with Lynn, and I remember kind of feeling quite nervous walking up to the high school maths table and going, what am I going to have to offer here? But actually now working with some of those high school maths and science teachers is my favorite, because our high school teachers know their subject so well, and so you ask the right questions and it unlocks the thinking that we all need in order to articulate those understandings. So I think we just need to respect that teachers know their grade level and they know and same with kindergarten, like kindergarten teachers know kindergarten students and they know what they're capable of. They know what's realistic, they know their challenges, they know how far they can extend them. So we really need to kind of capitalize on teachers' expertise there too.
Yeah, I was going to say I've been working with a kindergarten team as we develop the maths project and the maths curriculum, and obviously not a pedagogical specialist in early years, but understanding the basis of concepts and the basis of concept-based education. And so working with these kindergarten teachers is just, it's empowering, and it's amazing listening to what they say about and how much they know about the pedagogy of that grade level. But working with them has been so rewarding to learn the language and the types of questions that they ask and how they frame their thinking for their students. And it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's what gives us all energy, is to kind of have those conversations and see those aha moments for students and for teachers. All right, so what recommendations would you give to someone who's currently using a deductive approach, so used to that? And to be honest, a lot of us were encouraged to use a deductive approach from the beginning. Have we shared our conceptual understanding, our central idea, our statement of inquiry? So those teachers who have been doing that up until this point and are starting to wonder about the possibility of shifting to an inductive approach, what kind of advice would you give them?
There are so many things, but let's just think about a couple. So, I think the first thing to do is not feel pressured to do everything at the same time. So the first thing is little steps, just a lesson, or maybe even just part of a lesson, if that's where you need to start. And the easiest thing to start with is taking away those learning targets that you would naturally put on the board at the beginning of your lesson or the beginning of your unit, and hiding them, and just seeing what happens if you were to not tell students what it is that you were going to be learning today. And starting with thinking about, how can I bring my students to this thinking that I need them to do, by presenting them with some case studies. And that might sound tricky if you're not in a subject area that normally thinks about case studies. But for example, in science, we would think about case studies like examples, or having stations set up in our classroom to demonstrate different ways or different examples of the concept that you are working towards. And having students experience all of those and then having a conversation afterwards, hopefully supported by some sort of graphic organizer like a cross comparison chart, to be able to help them organize their thinking and be able to start looking for patterns in all those things that they've just experienced. So even just one little learning experience like that is where you can start to shift learning. It is different learning. You've got kids up talking about different things. You are, doing a lot more discussion, a lot more pattern finding, a lot more listening to what student ideas are, and questioning them and asking them to justify what they're thinking and how that maybe relates or doesn't relate to somebody else's thinking.
Yeah, fantastic.
I was going to say let go as the first suggestion myself, because I think it is indeed scary for us to let go in that sense. But I think here you are letting go, but you're letting go with the intention of knowing that students will catch it. So it's more like, the picture that comes to my head is, you throw the ball, but you don't decide where the students are going to catch it. Let them catch it where they want to. So in other words, you allow for students to own what they're doing. So I think the first my first tip always will be trust your students. They're capable of a lot more than we imagine. They will surprise you in the ways that you don't even imagine. And they will surprise you in ways that we will only be happy about later. So in the good way, really. So I think trusting your students while you're planning for something. But having said that, the second idea is build the structures for them to get hold of what you're doing. So it's inductive doesn't mean that you just let go of everything and just ask students to do whatever they want to. You organize their learning. Think of think in their shoes, how they would feel if this was presented to them. Would you be able to come to those conclusions if you were given that investigated, organized learning? So how can you do that for them? So thinking in their shoes sometimes is important. And that's what I try and do in my economics lessons and my theory of knowledge lessons now, where I really think, okay, now if this is a stage that they're at, what can they do next? Can they now be in a position to generalize? Can they now come to an understanding? Or do I need to do a little more work there? It's that fine balance that one can create, but it comes with practice. So till time you don't put yourself out there, it won't happen. So the overall tip is put yourself out there. Just try and do it. It'll be messy, as Jessica was saying. It'll be scary, it'll be messy, but at the end of it, when you come out of that class, you probably will be sharing on one of these platforms such a story where you'd be like, I tried doing it and wow, it worked. I didn't think it would, but it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thomas Guskey, we started by talking about transforming beliefs, and Thomas Guskey has a model of teacher change, and he talks about the teacher's beliefs never really change fully. They might change their practice, but their beliefs change when they see the impact that it has in the classroom. And I think that's what you were speaking to now, is that, wow, this is significant and this is worth it because look what my students are capable of. It's beyond what I had believed is possible.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Sumit said about training your students, because I think it's a really important point is when you are making that shift to be concept-based and to be inductive, you need to provide them with the structures that they're going to use for their thinking. And so often when teachers first when teachers first start down the concept-based journey, they think, oh, these strategies are really hard. Like my students couldn't do this, but actually they can, they really can. And even very young students. And sometimes it takes a few practice goes to get them really used to that strategy. But after a while, the students will literally pick up in the classroom what strategy you're using, and they'll be like, oh, we're doing group described name. This is awesome. I know exactly what we're doing. I know exactly where I'm going. Or we're doing a cross comparison chart, and I know that we need to create all of the headers for the cross comparison chart in a middle school setting maybe, or in a high school setting. So the students then get excited because they recognize those things, and they're able to think about how, or they're able to organize their thinking in something that is familiar for them, which makes that structure helps to provide that other structure that we need in order for them to generalize. So I think that point was really important, Sumit.
And I think also as you're saying that, I've seen so many times in classrooms, well, both actually in classrooms and with teachers who, as they're working through the institute and they're coming up to their third or fourth lesson, they're ready to generalize. They know that after they've done that cross comparison chart, that they're going to be invited to generalize. And so I've heard students, even elementary students, going, can we write our big idea now? Is it time for our we understand idea now? And they're actively looking for patterns before teachers even ask that conceptual question. They know that the purpose in learning is to see patterns, to make connections, and to look for a bigger idea than the case study itself. And so, yeah, definitely.
In fact, here there is research that was in fact done in 1999, and by someone called Gelman, and he or she they actually provide 4 themes, in which one of the themes actually says that even preschool children are capable of reasoning about abstract concepts. They are, and their understanding of concepts actually reflect on their theories that they form about the world. So they are capable of doing it. Sometimes let's not say that they can't do it. They can. So knowing that students can seek patterns, and students or other children can seek patterns, and we are pattern-seeking beings, I think is something we really need to emphasize on.
Yes, we are pattern-seeking beings. Absolutely, I love that.
You need to write that down as a quote, Rachel, from Sue-Beth.
And with that, I love that you're talking about kindergarten students, because so often the most important thing for kindergarten students to be thinking conceptually is that we're writing age-appropriate conceptual understandings. So when we can get the conceptual understandings appropriate and accessible for students, then they can absolutely come to those understandings themselves. So yes, fantastic. Well, so thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today for this rich discussion. I could probably continue the conversation for another 3 or 4 hours, but I know that you both have things to get on with today. So I really appreciate your time today. For those of you who are listening to this call, if you've got questions about what we've discussed today, or if you'd like to share some of your aha moments or some of your own learning journey, please add them to our Facebook group so that we can get those questions back to Jessica and to Sumit to get you some responses to your questions. So thank you both. I really appreciate your time.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation.